Hey, everybody. This is Jamil Zaki. It's great to see everyone. Welcome back to the Happiness Lab. I'm your host for this takeover, this Happiness Lab takeover. No, I'm thrilled to be here with my friend and your friend too, Lori Santos of Yale University. Hi, Lori.
Hey, Jamil, thanks so much for doing this for the Happiness Lab classroom. This is fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled. Some of you might remember that I had the privilege of chatting with Lori for this group, well, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we said, this was just so much fun. Let's do it again. And in particular, I thought that we could spend a little bit of time today talking about the importance of human connection at a time that a lot of us are really lacking it and are really feeling quite alone. And I'm thrilled to say that, in fact, I'm working on a project that will launch next week, an invitation for people around the world to celebrate and practice their skills at connecting with each other. And Lori has generously and kindly done a test drive of this program. So we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of human connection and what it means in a moment like this. And then I can't wait to hear Lori's experience with what I'm calling the Kindness Challenge. But maybe we can start at the beginning and just acknowledge that, both Lori and I care a lot about happiness, well-being, meaning, and social connection. And that's something that a lot of people are really not feeling a ton of these days. Maybe one could argue this is in lots of ways the hardest year that many of us have lived through in a lot of different ways. And what that's doing to us, whether it's the global pandemic or the ongoing fight for racial and economic justice, or the economic fallout of all of this and the uncertainty around it. I think many of us are feeling sad, scared, alone, angry. I mean, you name it. And we've seen rates of depression and anxiety shooting up. And you might think, well, this moment is really the opposite of a happy one. But I think Lori and Lori, tell me if you agree, would think this is the most important time to focus on those very things that a lot of us are lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really critical. I mean, in my class, those of you who take in the Coursera class know that we talk a lot about that you have to put work in to feel happy, right? This is the kind of thing that you have to put intentional effort in every single day of your life. And I think it's never been more important to put exactly that kind of work in. And one of the reasons I was really excited to talk with you today and to do this challenge is that you're giving us some really practical tips that we can do to put that work in right now to increase our social connection. It's almost like a rewirement for social connection that I think so many of us need right now.
Well, in our last conversation, you had talked in those terms about rewirements, and I love that idea. I mean, the way that I see your class and your podcast, what it's really brought to me is it helps clarify two things. One, we might want to be happy. We might want to be kind and connected, but our brain plays lots of tricks on us and sends us down these garden paths, right? Makes us think that we should pursue a certain strategy to be happy, healthy, and connected, when in fact we should be doing, in many cases, the opposite. But the other, which I love and is also consistent with my thinking, is we don't have to give in to that. We can make choices about how we want to live and how we want to feel, and that those choices are some of the most important pieces of work that we can engage in our lives. I mean, so for me, I've been thinking a lot, as I always do, as you know, Lori, about social connection and empathy in particular. So these difficult moments, times of tragedy and disaster, for instance, are so awful in so many ways. They're also sometimes moments of great connectedness, as we've talked about before, after sort of awful events like 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina, or going way back, sort of the bombing of London in World War II. You actually see these outpourings of kindness and connection. People reach out to total strangers and they're bonded in this really crucial way. And oftentimes when they look back on those really painful moments, they actually say, wow, those were some of the most connected, meaningful times of my life. And I think that, as we think about especially this pandemic, a lot of us, I think, want things to go back to normal. But it's so important to remember, well, two things, I guess. One, they're really not going to go back to normal. And two, as you've put it really well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, normal in some ways wasn't really that great, was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to get us all back to normal might be like, shooting too low, right? I think we have this wonderful moment where we've been on pause, and so many of the kind of ways we spend our time have been on pause, it's actually powerful to think about, well, how do we want to structure society? How do we want to structure our time? How do we want to behave in ways that can really increase our well-being? So I'm hopeful that we can see something like post-traumatic growth, right? Like we don't have to just go back to our normal baseline. We can actually get better. And I think social connection is really a domain, but we could do that even more. I look at my college students, where nationally in the US, college students are reporting being lonely at rates of like 60% of students are saying that they just don't feel like they have social connection. And so one of the reasons I like this opportunity for post-traumatic growth is like, we don't have to shoot for where we were before. We could get even better. And that's one of the reasons I love your challenges. I feel like these are quick, practical behaviors that we can all engage in that are super simple, that can make us kind of not go back to baseline, but kind of get one step better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of course, right? I mean, not only are college students and just people in the US lonelier, and around the world lonelier, that very lonely, they're lonelier than they were before. So there was a national survey that was conducted in 1985 in the US where people asked, how many folks could you really confide in, talk with about something that really means a lot to you? And the average person said that there were 3 people that they could talk with. They ran the survey again in 2006, and the average person said 2. They had lost 1/3 of their confidants. But the most troubling part about it was that the most common response in 1985 was also 3. The most common person said, yeah, I've got 3 friends I can count on. The most common response in 2006 was 0. Right? So 25% of people said that there was no one who they could count on to share their closest feelings, their most important feelings. So we have this epidemic of loneliness that occurred before the pandemic. The pandemic and everything that comes with it, as painful as it is, could be an opportunity to reconnect in a really deep way. Except, and here's the catch, right? We're all stuck apart from each other, and even worse, we're kind of supposed to stay apart from each other. That's what we need to do to protect public health. So the way that I've been thinking about it is that we can't depend on the same ways that we usually connect. We can't go around hugging people or bringing them all the bread that we're all baking these days. We need to find new ways to connect. We need to work out our muscles for empathy and caring in new ways, and get even better at these skills. And so that's why I developed what I'm calling this kindness challenge. And we'll talk about this. And I also wanted to flag, we're here for you. So if you have questions or thoughts that you want to share, we're sort of following the chat, and we're happy to think about what's on your mind as well, whether it relates to social connection, empathy, kindness, or well-being. So briefly, the kindness challenge is something that actually came out of a class that I taught. Lori, of course, has taught this phenomenal class on the science of well-being that millions of people have taken. I guess I've done almost the opposite of that, in that I've taught a tiny little class at Stanford called Becoming Kinder. It's just got 16 folks in it each year, and we talk about the science of empathy and kindness, but I also present them with these little kindness challenges. 1 exercise a week. Each one just meant to take a few minutes of time that helps them push the boundaries of social connection and kindness. And I felt like this summer, is a time that we usually are used to connecting with others, right? There's cookouts, there's extended families, there's road trips where maybe we're yelling a little bit in the car, but at least we're all together. And all of that has been taken away. I think a lot of people are feeling so disconnected that I've decided to make this kindness challenge, these exercises, available to everybody. And I'm running an event that to invite everyone to take part in them starting next week. And Lori, you've done some of these challenges already. So I'd love to hear some of your experiences with these rewirements around kindness.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll start by saying, when you asked me to be your kind of kindness challenge guinea pig, I was obviously excited, and I know the data is suggesting how powerful these interventions are. But if I'm being completely honest, which, I try to do in my class, like, it also felt like a little bit of work. Like, my mind was definitely predicting that this was not going to be fun and not going to be worth it. And I think that might be the first thing that it makes sense to acknowledge, right? Which is that even though, and we'll get to this in a second, like, they were amazing, I actually got a lot out of them. Like, even for me, the predictions were off, right? And I think that especially in the midst of this pandemic, right? And I think that's something to think about too, is that sometimes when we think about empathy and we think about kindness, it feels like a drain. It feels like work for me that's going to help somebody else. But that wasn't what I experienced. And that's not what you see in your data either, right, Jamil?
That's right. And I think it connects perfectly with some of the themes of your class, right? One, that again, our brain is playing tricks on us oftentimes, that what seems like the right choice is often the wrong choice. And the things that seem exhausting or like we don't have the bandwidth for them actually would be the most nourishing and enlivening things that we could do oftentimes. And so, yeah, I mean, we've both talked about this. I think we each struggle sometimes to practice what we preach. We as scientists have evidence about the things that make people happier and more connected. And yet sometimes in the busyness of our lives, we lose focus on that ourselves. So no one is perfect at this in any way. But I'm glad that the exercises were useful to you. What's the first one that you tried?
Yeah, so the first one I tried was, I think, one where I think it's called reversing the golden rule or swapping the golden rule, right? So the golden rule is this idea that we should do unto others as we want others to do unto us, right? But that often implies that we need some help kind of treating others well. And at least in my personal experience, I'm guessing in yours too, Jamil, since you set up the challenge, like that's not often the case. Sometimes the person we're hardest on is ourselves. And I know that that's been true for me. So the reversing the golden rule challenge is to actually offer yourself some kindness, to offer yourself some compassion, and to really take some time to kind of notice that, almost do a meditation, as you described it in your little challenge video, on kind of what you can do to treat yourself a little bit better. And I started with this one because I thought that was going to be the hardest for me, honestly. I feel like, when I'm doing kind of meditations on compassion, the hardest person to give compassion to is sometimes myself. And I feel like this summer has been particularly hard for lots of reasons because, I'm stressed and my bandwidth is lower. But I think I told you recently, Jamil, I actually had a kind of strange health thing happen. I had this thing, I'm not sure if any of our users have had BPPV, this benign positional vertigo, but it's this, hopefully none of you will ever have it because it's this sort of yucky period where you're experiencing all this vertigo and you're really dizzy and just kind of feeling awful, but it makes it hard to do like nearly anything. And so I haven't been working out as much. It's really hard for me to do yoga as frequently. Even I've just been like taking more time off from work than usual. And to be totally honest, I've been absolutely beating myself up over it, especially about the exercise part. I'm like, my gosh, like I go on my podcast and say I hike every day and I tell those people to like work out all the time. I can't even do this. And so for my reversing the golden rule challenge, I really just kind of sat and almost meditated on like what I was saying to myself, how much I was kind of beating myself up for this. And as part of the meditation, just thought, okay, what would I tell a friend? If a friend came to me and was like, oh, I'm so dizzy and feel like vertigo, I wouldn't say like, well, you really should get, some yoga. And if you can't do that, then you're pathetic, or I wouldn't say like, oh, taking a break off from work, what a loser. I would say, my God, like, just take some time and like, relax and do what you need to do. Like, this is, just take whatever you need to do. Right. And so it kind of made me take a moment to listen to what I was saying to myself, because I don't think I've actually done that before. And it kind of felt good to sort of treat myself and treat my own kind of illnesses like the way I would treat other people. So it was really a powerful exercise for me, and one that I'm still working on. So.
Oh man, I'm so glad to hear that was helpful to you, Lori, and so sorry to hear about that health issue. That sounds really disruptive, right? And I think a lot of us sort of, like you, I would certainly share this experience. I find it that the hardest person to be kind to very often is me, because I set these standards for myself and I just expect that no matter what, I'm going to check off all those boxes, right? And I think a lot of us are dealing with the need to take it easy on ourselves these days because the world has invaded our lives in all sorts of ways. I mean, for me, as you know, Lori, I have 2 young kids, and with them out of school, we're sort of doing a lot more parenting than usual, which is terrific, unless we beat ourselves up about it, and unless we expect exactly the same amount of work and everything for the same amount of exercise and everything else. If nothing can give, then that's a recipe for really feeling badly. I think another way that I experience this is, I often want to care for other people in my life who are struggling, but I'm struggling too. And there's a sense that, well, I want to tell them to take it easy, but then I need to pick up some of their work, or I want to be there for them, but I just, I feel like I'm sort of trying to pour out of an empty cup, right? And I think that one of the great things about reversing the golden rule, about thinking about giving ourselves the grace that we would give to other people, is that it also reminds us that our experiences and theirs are not that different, right? When we hold ourselves to a higher standard than other people, we're actually, in a way, trying to treat ourselves not as though we're better, but as though we're more capable than everybody else. We're not. We're just people like everybody else. And I think that it's so important to show that self-compassion, because that's a conduit for also connecting with other people.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it was just, a moment where I didn't realize how much beating myself up was making things worse, right? Like it was kind of making my physical sensations worse. I think when you're dizzy and you're beating yourself up, that's not a recipe for like good, like good outcomes. But even worse, like when I allowed myself to kind of do things in baby steps, I was actually able to get stuff done, right? And so I think this beating ourselves up conditioning kind of feeling bad, it's really counterproductive. And so, yeah, so for me, that was a really important challenge. I encourage all the folks who are watching this to try that out. Give yourself some grace and reverse that golden rule. Hold yourself only to the standards that you're holding other people to. It can feel amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that that was your experience. And again, I mean, for me, part of it too is that we often think that to be there for others, we need to sort of deny ourselves. But really, the way I think about it is that kindness starts at home, right? When we treat ourselves well, we open up the space to connect with other people in a more genuine and in a deeper way. So it's not, I think a lot of what you talk about in your class and what I talk about in this challenge is that we think of life in terms of either ors, in terms of a trade-off. But in fact, oftentimes we don't have to make a choice, for instance, between ourselves and others. When we do for ourselves, we open up space for other people. And when we do for other people, we often make things better for ourselves, which I guess would be the second. Is that the second challenge that you tried, Lori, the spending on other people?
Yeah. So the second challenge, I think, was day 2. I can't remember exactly the different ones because days all smushed together in the pandemic. Yeah, but the second challenge was spend on someone else. So, in a moment where you're maybe feeling a little defeated, do something nice for other people. And I think, as you point out, that could be spend in a like monetary way, like buy something for someone else. It could be spend in a time way. It could just be spend in an energy way, right? Like kind of devote some of your resources to someone else. And so this was also a good one for me because I feel like, in the midst of this pandemic, there's a lot of people in need and there's a lot of people who are grieving and going through something. And so for this part of the challenge, I decided to spend on a friend who lives far away. I haven't seen him in a long time, but over social media, I learned that his dog kind of really unexpectedly passed away. And this was a friend of mine who was like incredibly close to his dog. Like his dog was like his child in his life. And I just knew I could just only, even though I didn't see him and just saw the social media post, I could simulate the pain that he was in. And so I thought I, need to do something for him. I'm just going to spontaneously send him cupcakes. And like the caveat is like, in future, I might like check if he's home or if he wants cupcakes or whatever, but bracketed, I was like moved by sending cupcakes. I'm going to send cupcakes. So I sent him some cupcakes over Uber Eats. Just as I was about to send them, I like checked, like, just want to see if you're home. Something nice is coming for you. Turns out he was out of state. He wasn't actually home. So I ended up morphing the spend on other people. And then did a surprise kind of cupcake donation to the Uber Eats guy who was delivering the cupcakes. And I sort of texted him on Uber Eats, like, surprise, I'm giving you cupcakes. Like, I hope you enjoy them, or just pay it forward or give it to someone in need, congrats. And, even though my act was sort of deflected a bit, the Uber Eats guy was like so thrilled about this. He just was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And he was like, I was planning to do something nice for my mom, but, my finances aren't great. So I'm going to give my mom the cupcakes, and just seemed really excited. And, for me, this challenge was revealed a bunch, right? So first, I think as I started it, I had all these, what I was thinking about when I was doing it wasn't what this person I was giving the cupcakes or the person I was doing the nice act for would feel. I was just thinking, like, is this going to be awkward? Like, I haven't talked to this person in a while. Are they going to think it's weird? Are they even like cupcakes? Do they even eat sugar? I don't know, right? So I was kind of focused on whether it was going to work. And especially when it kind of crashed and burned a little bit, I had those sort of sensations. But really, like, the people who receive these things aren't thinking like, oh, that's awkward, or why'd you pick cupcakes and not, some healthy or whatever. Like, they're not thinking any of that. They're just noticing, oh, you did this wonderful thing for me. And even though my friend didn't get it, I think just the fact that I was thinking of him meant a lot. And even the Uber Eats guy, it was this wonderful, like, I think he was just kind of chuffed and thrilled. And then he could kind of pay it forward. to his mom in the future. I like to think the mom paid it forward, and there's just a wonderful string of like happy acts happening in Minnesota right now. But I think it's important to acknowledge that even me, like I can, quote the study that Nick Epley ran showing that we have the incorrect emotions about social connection. We focus on competence and whether it's going to come off right, whereas the people who receive our kindness and in some cases our gratitude are all focused on how it feels. Like I literally can quote the study, but I messed it up, right? And so I think that's really powerful, is to realize that we're not going to get it right when we're simulating what this is going to feel like. Oftentimes we get it wrong, and it's just much more powerfully positive than we would think. I think the cupcakes were like $8, right? Like it wasn't that much, at least, for in my financial thing, in the scheme of things, money wise, it wasn't that much. And even time wise, it wasn't that much. But what I got back was much huger.
Gosh, I love that story. And we're hearing a comment here on Facebook that someone loves how many people got a nice lift out of this. Yeah, it's almost like you created a kindness chain reaction sort of by a little bit by accident there. And I think that, in terms of the tricks that our mind plays on us, there are a couple here that it's amazing, again, that we teach this stuff and yet we experience it as well. I certainly have myself, right? One is the first one, which is, wait a minute, I'm so busy, I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the resources to do this. But oftentimes the gestures that are most powerful take very little time, not a lot of money, if at all, and not that much effort. And I think that gets to a second piece here, which actually I think also relates to reversing the golden rule. When I try to give a gift to somebody, I immediately start getting critical of myself. Oh, this is not thoughtful enough. I should write a longer card. I forgot what their favorite color is. Immediately, what does one do when we try to be kind to someone else? Oftentimes, we start to criticize ourselves that we're not doing kindness right. But then think about when someone does something kind for you. You probably barely think about the details of how they deliver it. It's just the idea that someone else was thinking of you and wishing you well that just touches you immediately. I mean, 90+% of the feeling of it is probably wrapped up just in the knowledge that someone cares, not in the specifics of how they're delivering it, which is, I think, gets back to how something simple, something easy, and something that even goes wrong in certain ways, like your cupcake delivery, can be really terrific. The other thing here is, with what I think one aspect of your story that's so interesting to me is you actually engaged in two acts of kindness, one towards somebody who you know, and one towards a stranger. And we talk about these in different terms in the psychology literature, right? On the one hand, it's super rewarding to see, we feel this natural empathy for the folks who are in our lives already, and we resonate with their emotions, and seeing them happy brings us this incredible joy. On the other hand, acting towards a stranger, we might have more distance from them, but it might create a different type of fulfillment. I'm curious as to what was the difference for you in sort of trying to sort of help your friend on the one hand, and then kind of randomly stumbling into this experience of helping a stranger?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they were very similar awkwardness predictions, because when I had the cupcakes, I'm like, is this Uber Eats guy going to think I'm crazy? Like, can he even pick the cupcakes up for himself? Like, is there Uber Eats rule he can't do? I didn't know some terms and conditions. So it's funny, like the mispredictions I had in some ways were the same, right? Not, am I spending enough or am I doing it right? But it was kind of like, this person got weird. But in practice, the positive energy that I got from both was really the same, especially when he said, I'm going to give it to my mom. I could almost picture the warm glove and like showing up to his mom, like, oh, where'd these cupcakes come from? And him telling the story and stuff like that. And so I think that was the big surprise in the case of doing something nice for a stranger. It was like, I know doing nice things feels good, but I mispredicted how good, especially given that it was a stranger.
I think one of the silver linings to the very dark cloud of this pandemic has been the rediscovery of neighbors. So, I live in a city, San Francisco, right? And city living, oftentimes you're around people, but alone at the same time, right? There are people who live right on top of you and underneath you. And oftentimes you don't really get to know them. And one of the things that I've seen, and it's not just me, I mean, this happened around the world, is that there have been these neighborhood mutual aid groups that have popped up. So, like, we have a Google form in our neighborhood where it's just people listing things that they might need, especially people who are vulnerable, like older or immunocompromised, listing things that they need, and other people listing things that they can offer, whether it's food or, offering to do errands. And there's been a lot of strangers helping strangers and then not being strangers anymore. Sort of like a return to the way that life might have been, I don't know, before the internet, before we became atomized in this way. So I think, next week when I encourage people to try this out and try spending on others, I think that the instinct for many of us will be to spend time or money or energy on people who we know. And that's totally fine and it's wonderful to do. I think it's also powerful and can be surprising to see how it goes to spend that same energy on people we don't know, and to see what type of fulfillment that brings, even a new sense of connection with someone who used to be a stranger.
Yeah, no, I think it's really powerful. I mean, again, I think, if you'd told me like, oh, you can gift cupcakes to some Uber Eats guy, how's that going to feel? I'm like, I don't know, like a one bump up in happiness, but something that like pumped me up honestly all week, right? And even now retelling the story, even in its ridiculousness, like it's kind of, making me happier.
That's awesome. Let's talk about one more challenge that you did, Lori. I know that you did one that is a more challenging challenge. It's certainly the one that my students at Stanford are the most scared of before they do it, which is called disagreeing better, or trying to use empathy to meet across difference. How did that go for you?
Yeah, well, this honestly, when I was looking at your challenges, this was the one that I was afraid of too. And honestly, kind of just practically, I was like, how am I going to, we're kind of in our homes, like we're not seeing people as much, how am I going to be able to actually disagree with someone from this vantage point of socially distancing? But as you know, kind of being an out there academic, you have opportunities for this because people sometimes email you really mean things like when you're out there. And so I get wonderful, appreciative, grateful emails, so many of them from the folks who take my class and things. But I also get emails from people who disagree with what I'm saying, or maybe haven't like engaged as deeply as someone who's taken my class. And I just so happened to get one from someone who saw a kind of slightly outdated CNN interview that I did, and just really was honestly just really pissed off about it. Wrote that, she thought what I was saying was ridiculous, that I was just like stuck in the Ivy League and I'd never met a normal person in my life and I should get off my like Yale high horse. It was just kind of mean and sort of one of those emails that like I was like, whoa, like I could watch my fight or flight system kind of engage. And my instinct was just, write this person off like she's a troll, she's trying to be mean or whatever. But because of this disagreeing better challenge, I like, was forced to kind of, I was like, oh, I can use this. I'll like do that for the thing, right? And so then I paused for a second. I'm like, okay, what would, a simulator, like what would cause me to write this email in the middle of a pandemic to some person I didn't even know, right? And I'm like, this person must be going through like a bad thing right now. This must be like, she must be in a tough zone, right? And so like, let me kind of engage as though that's the case. And so I wrote her back and said, I'm so sorry you reacted to my interview this way. Like, unfortunately it's a 2-minute clip of, lots of work that I do. I'm so sorry if it came off the right way. I'd love to hear more of what I said that made you feel that way. And, like you seem like a thoughtful person. Like I'd really value your opinion about what I could do better. And what was interesting is that, like it could have been a bad troll experience, wrote back, like some expletive, like leave me alone or whatever, but she didn't. She said, thank you for engaging with what I said. And here's why I was so mad. And she kind of went through that she thought I was ignoring certain Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or she simulated me as this Ivy League professor that was like out of touch with what real people were going through. And we kind of had like almost not like a heart to heart, but like I heard what she saw in that interview and where she thought I was going wrong. And I said, can totally see it from your side. That's not what I meant. And it wasn't so much that I like won her over. Like, I don't think she's like taking my class now or any, like thing like that. But what she responded was to say, thank you for thoughtfully like replying to my email. Right. And that was important because that wasn't how I started the interaction. First, when I started the interaction, I was like just pissed off and filled with rage and my fight or flight system was going. Those were emotions that if I chose to disagree better, I didn't have to feel. But also it made me realize that I was writing her off. Honestly, I thought, someone to watch my CNN interview and disagree with me, like they must be, I don't know, stupid or just like not really ill informed and stuff. And when she wrote back and actually had thoughtful objections to it, I was kind of shocked and realized that I wasn't giving her the benefit of the doubt, given her email. And so I feel like it taught me a lot, and it actually brought me a lot of positivity, right? In the sense that, if I hadn't written her back or we hadn't had that engagement, I would have felt some like low level, annoying, like a low level pissed offness, honestly, for days. Like those kind of emails can eat away at you, right? But I was able to shut all that off because, like, when you react in a different way, when you engage with somebody and really have empathy for them, once you're feeling compassionate towards them, you just kind of can't feel that way for them anymore. So it not only kind of helped me feel empathic, but it brought me to a better place emotionally too.
I love that, Lori. Yeah. So Monica on Facebook is also writing that she appreciates that you characterized your response as watching your fight or flight response kick in, right? I mean, I think a lot of us these days, whether it's on social media or in person, we have lots and lots of opportunities for our fight or flight response to kick in, right? I mean, we're not just feeling fear and sadness these days, a lot of us feeling anger. We're feeling as though other people are putting us at risk, for instance, in the context of the pandemic. And we just feel this outrage, rightfully so in many cases. And then a question that I always ask is, well, what do we do with that response? And what is it doing for us? Right. And I think oftentimes we decide that, well, to counter that with empathy would be exhausting, or it would be the same as giving up my own position. Like to empathize with someone is to condone what they're saying. So I guess in your case, empathizing with this person who is writing you would basically be giving them more ammo to continue to troll you or to continue to disparage you. I think what your story is telling me is that sometimes both of those are wrong, right? That when you give yourself a chance to be empathic, the person on the other side can surprise you with what they give back. That doesn't mean that they're going to agree with you right away, but they might show you more about their perspective, and there might be some mutual understanding that can pop up even amidst disagreement. But I think part of what really resonates with me about your story is that it's not just about getting this other person to see you in a new way or seeing them in a new way. It's about what it does to us when we write people off, when we dehumanize people, because that actually is a toxic way of thinking that can hurt us, right? I mean, like you're saying, to just write this person off and feel outrage might be exhausting. It might have stayed with you for days. But being willing to at least send some human signal back, even if it's into the void, might not just be something that we do for other people, but something that we do for ourselves as well, right? A way to rehumanize ourselves and say, well, no matter how people are acting, I will act in an empathic way towards them because that's who I am, right? And I think it gives ourselves a chance to not feel like we're caught in this cycle of just outrage and even hatred sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, this was a happier case, right? She, again, didn't fully agree with me, but wrote back and sort of expressed like more positivity, right? That didn't need to be the case. But my guess is even if she never wrote back, even if she wrote back and was mean to me, like just the fact that someone took her seriously, responded kindly, like my guess is that that's going to have an impact down the line too, right? And so I think we often forget that these things are cyclical, right? That our reactions to somebody can change their behavior later on. And so in one of my podcast episodes, we talked to Sigal Barsade, who talks about this phenomenon of the affective spiral, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're catching my negative emotions, Jamil, then you're going to, give them to somebody else, and we might give them back to each other if we're close friends or in relationship partners or something. And they're like, we can kind of just get in this spiral where negative emotions get worse and worse and worse. And so just those small acts in a big community can actually switch the affective spiral. It can just like pump some positivity out there. And I feel like, especially in this time when like the fight or flight is activated, the outrage, the fear, all that stuff, just like doing your work to kind of flip the switch a little bit can be so powerful, because ultimately it will come back to you too.
Yeah, that work that you're describing reminds me of the old work from John Gottman that you might remember, where basically they looked at romantic couples and had them fight in the lab while they measured how much their palms were sweating, which is kind of a sign of how much that fight or flight response is kicked in. And they had this thing called physiological linkage. So as one person got sort of more worked up, the other person would as well. We sometimes think of that as a measure of empathy because, hey, if you're upset and I get upset, that means that we're connecting in a certain way. It turns out that during a fight, that type of empathy is not really that helpful, because if you get on that, one of the comments around Facebook saying that hamster wheel of catching other people's negative feelings, you can end up sort of in the same cycle that your guest was talking about, right? Where it just escalates and escalates over and over again. And I think sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do is step off that hamster wheel. And we do that by expressing kindness and empathy, even to the people we disagree with, irrespective of whether they're convinced, whether they come back to us with kindness. At least we have acted in an authentic way that says who we are and who we want to be, even in this kind of like angry context where we might be all getting worked up at the same time.
Yeah, and I think you've so nicely in your book, and even as we chatted on the podcast, kind of pointed out a way to do this, which you do in the challenge too, which is to have those people that we're kind of annoyed by share their side, which is really hard, right? I mean, in the email, I basically asked this woman, "Why did you think I was an out of touch Ivy League professor? I'd love to hear expound upon what I did wrong, right?" And that kind of perspective, kind of asking, is hard to do, but was really effective. I thought, she's going to come back and she's going to say things that are going to make me more annoyed. But in fact, kind of seeing her reasons for it, or seeing from her perspective, I was like, oh yeah, I saw this 2-minute clip of this lady in this house that looked like this, and I was in a bad place, I'd think she was a jerk too, right? So it's, you can, by asking for other people to share their side of it, to share how they got there, their own personal views, can be a really powerful way to perspective take and allow you to experience empathy with people you just never thought you could empathize with before.
Yeah, I mean, I think an expression of curiosity can surprise people and disarm them in ways that not only allow you to step off that hamster wheel of fight or flight response, but allows them to do it as well. Whether they take that opportunity or not is up to them. But I think giving it to them is a terrific gift, actually, to everyone involved. So yeah, I mean, Laura, I'm so thrilled that you agreed to be a guinea pig for this challenge, and I couldn't think of a better person to do it, and I just really appreciate it. And as I was mentioning at the top of the hour, really, what my hope is that, so starting next week, next Monday, I'm going to be posting these little 2-minute or less videos that will invite everyone, any of your friends, to join in and do the same challenges that Lori has been doing over the last week. And I'm hoping that people can share their experiences using the hashtag kindness challenge. The idea here is to basically spend a week focused on connecting better, on doing those rewirements to get better at empathizing and better at acting kindly in this new, often difficult world that we live in, and then to share our experiences together and build a community around that connection. So if you're interested, there's a couple of things that you can do. And by the way, if you have questions, I don't know about you, Lori, maybe we can stick around for a couple more minutes and talk about people's questions. But for now, if folks are interested, there's a couple of things you can do. One, if you want to sign up for the Kindness Challenge and sort of receive the messages about each one every day, you can go here, bit.ly/Kindness Challenge 2020. And I'm happy to share that with folks further. And then second, I'm kind of thinking that the most powerful version of this would be if not only we do these challenges, but we invite people in our lives, our friends, our families, our colleagues, to do it together with us. I mean, I think like so many things, kindness is best done together, right? And best celebrated together. And so to create that community, if you want, I've also posted a sort of invitation video. My kids make a special appearance as art directors, and you can find that here at warforkindness.com/challenges. So I'm happy to share this more on the Happiness Lab classroom site. But yeah, I mean, again, thank you, Lori, for doing this. And let's see if we've gotten any questions.
And I'll just end with saying, again, it's important for me to kind of be totally honest about this stuff. When you asked me to do it, I was like, man, I'm so busy, I'm dizzy, like I can't, but they ended up being fantastic. But the flip side is I definitely wouldn't have done them unless I knew that I had the social support of talking to you and then talking to my whole Happiness Lab classroom. And so really, really take Jamil's advice and do these with a friend, do these with a group, do these with your family, like kind of getting that social support and that kind of social commitment to kind of doing them can get you over the hump of the awkwardness that is just totally a misperception. Like once you actually do these things, you'll feel amazing. So.
Yeah, it is. It's the same type of thing as for me, like running. I never want to do it, but I'm always glad that I did it afterwards. And it's just like the hardest part is that first minute of getting out the door and starting. And I think, yeah, like you're saying, Lori, sometimes social accountability and sort of just doing things together is one of the best ways to jumpstart us on the path towards something that we really want. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. It seems like some folks are happy to join in, and I'm so thrilled for that. And yeah, we will be. I'll be here, so you can contact me as well. And I can't wait to hear about your experiences. Please use the hashtag Kindness Challenge, all one word, so that we can see and talk with each other. And that will be on Facebook, but also on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. And so let's get together and celebrate human kindness and connection at a time that a lot of us could really use it. And speaking of kindness and connection, I sound like a broken record here, but Lori, thank you so much for your kindness. I'm so grateful to have you as a friend and a colleague. So thank you so much for taking part in this.
Ditto, ditto. And thanks so much for sharing this with the Happiness Lab classroom. I feel like so many people on here have completed the rewirements for our class. And that's like, finishing your first year of college, but now you're on to like sophomore year, or like maybe even like junior, senior year. So, embrace this as like, Happiness 102. I think it's really experience for everyone.
Amazing. We're in grad school now. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.